Welcome back, Ram fans. This is Rams Up, your favorite LA Rams podcast. We are a member of the Fans First Sports Network. You can also follow us on YouTube. Our channel is at LA Rams Up. We have video content there as well as our podcasts. I will be joined often by my football gurus, Ian and Paul. Hey, we're not Rams insiders. We're just fans who love talking about the NFL and our LA Rams. Let's get to it. Hey, welcome back, Ram fans. I got a treat for you today. I have Jeremy Betz and Andrew Wilbur of the Draft Dynasty Podcast. They cover fantasy football, obviously, and I invited them to come on the show and talk about fantasy football from a Rams perspective. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Tell us, Jeremy, can you tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you guys do?
Absolutely. So we've been doing kind of like switching back and forth between draft coverage and fantasy football coverage between myself and Andrew here the last couple years. And, it was never anything official, and Fans First Sports didn't have like a draft show, didn't have a fantasy show. So we decided that we would kind of combine our two passions here and put them together into what is called the Draft Dynasty Podcast now. And so during the season, we'll probably talk a lot of fantasy and also hype up the NFL draft as it starts coming around. And then once draft season comes in full swing, we talk about that. But right now we're doing fantasy football previews. It's draft season for fantasy. And we're just trying to hit all the teams, all the divisions, and get players and users ready for the season. Right now we're going through our stars and our studs and sleepers for each division. So if you haven't checked out any of those, we've gone through, I think, 4 or 5 divisions already. So working through those, and it's been a lot of fun. I know brand new for us doing this portion of it just since the start of the off season. But it's been a lot of fun. I don't know if Andrew's enjoyed it as much as I have, but I've really enjoyed it.
I talked to Jeremy a little bit before you joined. You're a Steelers fan as well?
Yes, sir, I am. We've been doing Steelers podcasts actually longer than we've been doing the draft podcasts, but we just both have a passion for the fantasy and for the NFL draft. So it was something that it was really Jeremy's idea to kind of combine the two and kind of rebrand the show, because like he had said, we had been doing coverage for a while on that, but we had recently done a rebrand to the show, and it's just been good giving a new perspective and kind of being able to cover both year round.
Yeah, hey, living in Southern California, there's plenty of Steelers fans out here, so I'm going to make sure they find out about your show. My next door neighbor is actually a really annoying Steelers fan, to be quite honest. But we have a good time sparring in the backyard here.
There you go.
So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the Rams. Let's call them the skill position guys. If you want our kickers skill position, we'll talk about kickers too, and the defense at the end. And I'll throw out, the plan here is I'm going to throw out what I think of a player, what type of season I think they're going to have, and what the value might be draft wise. And then you guys are going to correct me, tell me where I'm getting it right, where I'm getting it wrong, talk me off the ledge if necessary. And we'll start off with Matthew Stafford. Man, I think Matthew Stafford is set up for a really good season. I looked at last year. He was rated around 20th, and he's probably around there again. Great quarterback, not necessarily a guy you want as your starter in fantasy football. And I'm kind of worried about drafting him because I think the Rams' running game is really set up well, especially in the red zone. So, he's going to get drafted, but I see him as someone's going to have him as their backup. And if he's your backup and someone goes down, not a bad guy to have coming off your bench. So how do you guys feel about that? Am I kind of close on my eval of Stafford?
I would say you're pretty spot on. Stafford to me has always kind of been, especially recently though, a better real life NFL quarterback than he has been a fantasy quarterback. One of my favorite quarterbacks to watch last year. The way he processes the game, how he sets up receivers, how he spreads the ball around to the weapons on that roster, as well as being able to just, pepper one guy. We've seen that as well with Cooper Kupp. We saw it with Puka Nacua last year. I think he's a guy that probably is more of like a priority QB2 ad. If I'm in a 2 quarterback league or a super flex league, he's a guy I'm looking at for my second spot. I would be just fine having him as my second quarterback as a starter. He finished 15th in scoring last year. He's going as QB 19 by ADP right now, according to Fantasy Pros consensus board. So that's kind of a good sweet spot for me. I like him in the same range as a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Baker Mayfield, which is kind of where he's going. But he does have more upside. I think you get a healthy Cooper Kupp this year. I think he's got a chance to be a little bit better than he was last year. Whether or not that translates to a higher ranking is yet to be seen, because there's some other quarterbacks on the scene this year that also have some skill sets that are very intriguing.
How do you feel about it, Andrew?
The thing I like about Stafford is how he finished last season. When you take a look at, obviously Cooper Kupp had his injuries last season, wasn't really ever fully healthy, but you look at how he finished last season: Arizona week 12, 32, Cleveland week 13, 28, Baltimore 29, finished off in the last 6 weeks. 5 of the weeks were 22 points or more in fantasy. And I liked how he finished last year as Kupp, even though it wasn't fully healthy, the offense seemed to become a little bit more like the Rams offense that, we've been accustomed to seeing, with Kupp becoming a little bit more of a focal point. I think that looks good for this upcoming year. Obviously, Demarcus Robinson was a big addition as well. I think he could play a big role in this offense, but the pieces they have fit what Stafford wants to do. Again, I agree. I don't think that he's someone that you want to have starting week to week, but in 2 QB leagues, I don't think he's a horrible option as a QB2.
Yeah, it seems like we're all in agreement on that. And I have to tell you, Ram fans are just in love with Stafford, his gunslinger mentality. Of course, the downside with a gunslinger quarterback is you have those plays that blow up on you occasionally. But still, I love, especially in the playoffs, he's a great guy to have on your side. Now, when we get to the running backs, it's hard to talk about Kyren Williams without, we're going to bleed into it, talking about Blake Corum, I think. Now, last year, Kyren wasn't even on my radar, as, I thought he'd be a guy that might get some touches. He barely got any touches his rookie year. We were totally blown away by what he brought to this offense. And if it weren't for the drafting of Blake Corum, I'd be very comfortable taking him. I don't know. I see him ranked as, is it the 8th running back and maybe number 32 overall, somewhere in that range. And so maybe a 3rd or 4th round running back, but I don't, that's probably about right. It's just that concern about how much the Rams get Blake Corum involved. And, Blake Corum's a rookie, and sometimes rookies just don't play at all for Sean McVay until they prove they can block. So kind of torn on Kyren Williams. How do you guys feel about him?
Andrew, why don't you go ahead, since you're a Michigan guy? Blake Corum is the one eating into him.
Yeah, Kyren Williams has been tough. So in the few mock drafts that I've done, Kyren Williams has been going a lot higher. He's been going a lot of times probably early 2nd round, which for me is a little too rich. And the reason why is not necessarily that I think Kyren Williams has much to worry about the beginning of the year in terms of usage. I think he's going to be the bell cow. Sean McVay prefers having one guy. I mean, even think of the time when they had Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. He would ride the hot hand, but typically he would ride that whole guy for a full game. And I think at the beginning of the year, Kyren doesn't have anything to worry about. But as the season goes on, I do have concerns about his health. He had health concerns in college. He's never had a completely clean bill of health, and that's a concern for me. And I think if Corum gets an opportunity to be a bell cow, say in an instance where Kyren Williams goes down, I think Blake Corum takes the job and does not look back. And you're entirely right about the blocking. Sean McVay is very big on blocking. I will say at Michigan, Blake Corum, his senior year, was one of the best blocking running backs in all of college football, and that bodes well for him getting onto the field early. I think once he gets onto the field, it's it's all uphill from there for Kyren Williams owners. It's going to be really difficult. I think if you're willing to draft Kyren early on, that's fine. But if you're drafting him, I think you almost have to draft Blake Corum as well. Even if you draft him maybe a round or two higher, he's usually going, probably 10th, 11th round. Jeremy, you may have that ADP up there, but in that range, I'd be willing to take him maybe in the 8th or 9th, just knowing that I have a guy one way or the other. I'll have a bell cow in this backfield. So that would be how I would approach it. I'm a big fan of Blake Corum. I think he has a chance to become the starter, but as of right now, I think Kyren will be the starter until injury.
This might be, Mark, where you see our allegiances come into play a little bit, our biases come into play, because I'm an Ohio State fan and Andrew's a Michigan fan. So I kind of have a different viewpoint on Blake Corum a little bit. He is going as RB37 right now. And I think that because of what you got from Kyren Williams last year, he definitely comes into this thing as the bell cow back. And Corum, though he plays a very similar style, and you almost can't tell the two apart as when it comes to how they play the game, their strengths and weaknesses. I think that just goes into Sean McVay's system is so specific. He has a prototype that he likes out of the backfield, out at wide receiver. And I think that when you start talking about how they mix and match these guys in the backfield, I just think that he wanted a guy that could come in and spell Kyren when needed, that could do the same things. He didn't have to change up the offense. He didn't have to expect something different out of the backfield. So I don't know if it actually cuts into Kyren Williams' workload much at all, especially early in the season. If there is an injury, I do think Blake Corum becomes a very viable fantasy piece, but I don't see him taking over the RB1 position necessarily. I think Kyren's been too good and knows the offense too well to be able to just cancel him out of it completely.
So ideally, I think you both would agree, if you grab Kyren, you want to try to grab Blake Corum as well, if possible. But sometimes it just doesn't work, but you know how fantasy football drafts go. And in both these guys, what I think another thing McVay liked about him, and Andrew can probably vouch for this, man, Corum just finds the end zone. Yes. It's just amazing. He just gets the ball into the end zone. And not that it has anything to do with fantasy football, he's probably the highest character guy coming out of the draft last year. It seems like got to be up there in the top 5. Just a pretty amazing guy.
As draft guys, if I can real quick, it's very funny because we comped Kyren Williams and Blake Corum to each other this offseason. And then we also comped Blake Corum to our very own Jaylen Warren as Steelers fans with the type of running style he has. But Andrew, when we talked about Kyren Williams a couple of years ago, the testing numbers were horrible. We didn't think he was going to do anything at the NFL level. So just goes to show you that these guys can get in the right system and still succeed.
Yeah, it was actually my son that said when he was watching Corum's highlights, he said, if you squint a little bit, you think you're watching Kyren Williams.
Yeah.
So similar. And now when you talk about the wide receivers, kind of have a similar dilemma. Cooper Kupp, a couple of years ago, we saw what he could do. His big year, his Triple Crown year, he gets dinged up, doesn't play 100% for forever, it seems like. And along comes Puka Nacua. And again, we didn't see this coming as Ram fans. First game, he runs out there with the starters and becomes Matthew Stafford's favorite target. And that's one thing we need to talk about, I think, is throughout his career, Matthew Stafford has always had a number one guy that he goes to, go back to Calvin Johnson and then Cooper Kupp and now Puka Nacua. What's going to happen with both of these guys out there? It creates quite a dilemma. Now, what I saw is you guys probably have better data than me. I think Nacua is the number 8 wide receiver. Is that right? And Cooper Kupp's around in the low 20s.
Yep.
And
I've got Puka Nacua from Fantasy Pros ADP. So it's a consensus board though. He's going as a wide receiver 7. Nacua is, and then Cooper Kupp is going as wide receiver 19 in drafts right now.
And I don't know. I mean, I love both these guys. Just love them to death. But I don't know who. Obviously Nacua is going to go first based on last year and the concerns about Kupp's health. But if Kupp is healthy, that really adds a lot of risk to drafting Nacua in the first round, doesn't it?
I think so. I'm kind of out on taking him that early. If I had my choice of other receivers in that range, I think I would probably take it. He's going ahead of Garrett Wilson, who I really like this year. Devontae Adams is in this conversation, as well as Chris Olave and Drake London. So those are guys that I all kind of gravitate personally towards over Nacua this year. Not because I don't think he's going to be a successful, viable fantasy option, but I just think that when you combine maybe a little bit of a resurgence of a healthy Cooper Kupp in this offense and what he was for Matthew Stafford, I don't think Stafford just forgets about Cooper Kupp this year. So I would expect both players to be top 25 wide receivers, but I would expect Puka Nacua to probably be more of a borderline wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, and Cooper Kupp to be kind of the lower end of that wide receiver 2 spectrum this year. And as far as value goes, I actually like the value of where you're getting Cooper Kupp more so than I like the value of where you're getting Nacua in drafts right now.
How do you feel about it, Andrew?
I actually like Cooper Kupp more than I do Puka Nacua. That's kind of been my bold take so far this year. If Kupp stays healthy, I mean, he is still being, early reports are showing that he's still being schemed up as the one in this offense. He's still that guy. And Stafford, even though the connection with Nacua last year was great, I think much of that can be contributed to the fact that his skill set as a receiver is very similar on the outside to what Kupp does in the slot. And physically, they're built very similar in a lot of ways. So I think that with Cooper Kupp, I think you're getting great value where you're getting him out right now. You're talking late third, early fourth round. If I can get him in that range, I absolutely love it. I think he has a chance to maybe not return to top 5 fantasy numbers at the position, but I think he has an outside chance of being a top 10 receiver in fantasy this year. I don't think that there's a big difference between him and Nacua. And if he continues to be schemed up as the one in the offense, I think there's just as many opportunities for him as there are Nacua. I think both can be fantasy relevant, but if I'm choosing one, especially where they're being drafted right now, I think the value is definitely with Kupp.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. And the thing about both these guys, as you guys probably well know, they both play a very physical style. They're both involved in the running game. They're both great blockers, and that puts them at risk. And Nacua he got dinged up a little bit last year as well, which is going to lead me in at the end here. I'm going to mention another wide receiver I kind of like on the Rams now. And all three of these guys, you mentioned the size, Kupp, Nacua, and DeMarcus, all in that 6'1", 6'2", 205, 210 range. They're all very similar, and they all block really well. Yep. Okay, I think we're kind of on the same page with those guys. And, when it comes to the Ram tight ends, I really don't have much to say. I mean, Tyler Higbee has never been a tight end you target in the draft, and now I'm not sure when he's going to be back. You got Colby Parkinson, fairly unproven, great blocker. Davis Allen, really promising, but I don't really see myself drafting any of these guys unless I'm there in the 16th round and I haven't drafted a Ram yet, and I'm going to go grab a Ram. How do you guys agree with the tight ends? It's not really a lot to say about them from my perspective.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think I would steer clear from them pretty much at all costs at this point. However, I will say this, when you get to waiver wire season, right, middle of the year, there's a very good chance that one of these guys has become relevant at that point. How it shakes out is one thing, but for drafts, I would avoid it at this point. So just keep in mind, though, that eventually Matthew Stafford's going to find one of these guys in the red zone. They're going to put up a 12, 13-point week because they scored a touchdown, and then somebody's going to be fantasy relevant on the waiver wire. And in that case, keep your eyes open, keep them peeled, because Matthew Stafford does like to throw to the tight end when he's got a good one. We'll see which one of those guys steps up, though.
I think there's one. Oh, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I think one player that is interesting is Hunter Long, just because he was involved in a trade. So the Rams obviously saw value in him. And he's a guy who can do it both ways. He can block as well. I liked both Davis Allen and Miller Forrestall coming out of the draft, but Forrestall is more of an H-back type, and Davis Allen, I think he's got a lot of promise. He's got that big size in the red zone. It's just, can he do anything other than get you maybe one touchdown every 5 weeks or something like that? He's not going to contribute much other than that. So I agree with what Jeremy's saying, though. If one of these guys does cement themselves getting consistent, even if it's just maybe 4 or 5 targets a week, something at the tight end position, that can be value in the middle of the season when there's nothing at tight end or your tight end gets injured. There's just not a lot of depth there. So I wouldn't draft any of them, but I definitely think this is a room that has enough talent to be intriguing as we get toward the middle of the season and injuries take place.
Yeah, Colby Parkinson, 6'7", and the Ram fans' take on that is he's going to be a red zone target, but they're going to have a lot of red zone targets. So until we see it on the field, it's hard to get too excited. But yeah, I think that's good. That's probably good advice. Keep an eye on Parkinson and Allen, maybe Hunter Long in weeks 5, 6, 7. Maybe see if one of them gives an inkling of being the guy moving forward.
Yep.
And Tyler Higbee, I just don't know when he's going to be back. That was a pretty brutal hit he took in the playoffs. So how about the kicker? And this is the thing about the kicker, Joshua Carty. I get it. He's a rookie. The Rams were one of the highest scoring teams in the league last year, and I suspect they will again this year. Yet, they're rating him. I see him maybe 19th or 20th on the kicker list. Where are you guys seeing him?
I've got him way down at 30, actually.
Yeah,
on the
okay.
consensus board. So
yeah,
he's going behind Nick Folk in Tennessee. He's going behind Brandon McManus, who's a free agent currently. So
yeah. So I mean, I get it. He hasn't kicked in the NFL yet.
Yeah. And
I know a lot of people pick their kickers at the very end, anyways, last round. But I just don't understand. He's got to be higher than that, doesn't he? What am I missing something? Is this where you talk me off the ledge?
I think that he should be going higher than that. I think as some of these, obviously McManus being cut and different things like that, I think that will sort itself out as the season goes forward. He doesn't have the greatest accuracy from on deeper kicks, on kicks over 50 yards. 4 of his 5 misses last year came from over 50 yards. He's pretty consistent from inside 50, though. So I think, especially with the fact that it's inside a dome, they have a lot of games in fair weather. That is big compared to maybe a guy like one of my top rated kickers would be like an Evan McPherson from Cincinnati, a guy that I think is right up there with a lot of kickers. But if you think if Carty can improve his accuracy from outside of 50, he's got a strong leg, but just being accurate as he gets to those deeper distances, if he can prove that, I think he has a lot of upside in fantasy. I don't know that I would necessarily draft him at this point because I think there's a lot of good kickers that have proven themselves. So I don't know necessarily the need to draft a rookie kicker. But I would say that if the Rams are putting up points, if both Nacua and Kupp are healthy, they're throwing the ball, they're getting the ball into scoring position a lot, I definitely think Carty has top 15 kicker upside this year. It's just unless you're in a really deep league, unless he's top 10, you can more than likely get him on the waiver wire. So right. I think depending on the week, especially if your kicker's on bye, he's the ideal guy. Maybe you pick up, especially if they're playing a game at home and it's inside a dome, and it would make a lot of sense. I think he has a lot of upside, but I think it's just more the unknown with him, and knowing that you can get a proven guy. There's a lot of high-powered offenses that are going to be putting up points.
You agree with that take, Jeremy?
I do. The kicker market is interesting. You have basically outside of the top 2 or 3 guys, everybody kind of finishes. I'm looking at it right now. Between kicker 10 and kicker 10 and kicker 24, there was a 20-point difference in scoring last year. So not really a needle moving position for fantasy anyway, unless you can really hit your matchups. And I think that's where smart GMing comes in, where you got to watch your matchups. I stream kickers all the time. Even if I have, a very consistent kicker, I'm willing to cut that kicker and stream if necessary for the right matchup. So to me, he's a great guy to keep a streaming eye on, but not a guy that I'm drafting at this point, unless you're just feeling I've got a really good team and I'm a fan of this team. Let's go ahead and get him.
I think what you're telling me is upside's there, but why take the risk? that there's other kickers
Yeah.
that are proven, and just roll with the proven guys.
Roll with them.
Darn it,
when
I
you're
was going to
drafting.
draft him.
Yep.
I still may draft him.
Sure.
It depends. Well, it's a good time to ask because when I draft, I always pick one Ram. Do you think is that a bad strategy? What do you guys do? Do you guys try to pick a Steeler every year? Or is that a mistake?
I typically draft someone from the Steelers. I guess it depends on the year. Last year, I was a little bit lower on some players. George Pickens was the one guy I really wanted from the Steelers offense last year. We kind of anticipated the Steelers offense struggling just with Matt Canada still being there. We knew that the offensive system didn't really work. So we weren't super high on the offense in general, but I know for at least me, we still thought George Pickens was going to do even better than what he did this past year. And we're high on him again this year. So he was the one player I was targeting, but if somebody else took him further ahead, he was kind of the one guy if I didn't get, and like, maybe I'll just pass on the team this year.
What about you, Jeremy? You drafting a Steeler every year?
I typically try to, but I will say this, I play in about 14 or 15 leagues every year, so it doesn't always work out for me. So, but yeah, when I get a chance to, I will. If it's close between two players, I'll definitely take the Steeler first.
Yeah, I forgot about Matt Canada. I heard some F-bombs directed at him coming over my fence here, my fence line a few times last fall, I think.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah. Okay, we could talk real briefly about defense and the Rams defense. No Aaron Donald. A lot of changes, new defensive coordinator. I think the defense is going to surprise people, but I certainly don't think it's draftable at this point. I don't know if there's much more to say about it. Although I would say that if the Rams offense does produce like I think it might, maybe the defense, get some extra turnovers, that type of thing. But still, I don't think they're draftable.
Yeah. I like their pass rush. But I still have concerns about that secondary, how many takeaways they can create. Unless they score a touchdown, special teams is going to be huge though this year. If you're drafting a defense special teams and not like individual defensive players, then that's something to keep in mind here. How the Rams, I guess, who they put back there as the kick returner. Was it Tutu Atwell last year that was the punt returner?
No, they basically went to a fair catch strategy, and it was
Okay.
God, who was it? They had the worst special teams in the league by far. It was generationally bad.
That's right.
And I think this year the theory is it's going to be Boston Scott.
Okay, so I'm thinking that you probably don't give them much of a boost unless they've got a guy who can just scheme it up really crazy on the special teams unit. But when you're talking about the defense, there's some guys with upside. It's very young defense as well. I'm sure you are very aware of that after all the rookies that played significant snaps last year and the rookies that they're going to have to rely on this year as well at positions of need. So I like the growth and development trajectory of that group, but they're just not fantasy relevant for me right now.
Yeah. Anything more to add to that, Andrew?
Kobe Turner is an interesting guy because Jeremy and I got to interview him last year before the draft as a potential prospect for the Steelers. And the guy is he's a worker. He's a grinder. And I think the combination of him and Braden Fisk, another grinder guy, I think they could do something really special along the defensive line going forward. But the linebacker position, nothing really pops out. Ernest Jones has shown a lot of promise. He's done a lot of good things. Fadakasi has some experience out of Rutgers. The secondary, there's a lot of concerns for injury. Obviously, Tre'Davious White, I think that was a nice signing for them. It's a low risk but high reward signing. Very high risk, though. And there's a lot of guys that are expected to be depth, but if just one of them can rise to the occasion and be a starter, I think this could be a viable defense in the secondary. And I'm looking primarily at Quentin Lake, another guy that we interviewed a couple years ago, and then Sean Jolly from App State. If he can become a guy who can play significant snaps in nickel and dime packages, I think that could be huge for this defense. Could really help assist the depth, which has a good blend of veterans and young guys. It's just hard to sort out. There's so much depth, but not really any stardom at the top. So I think that would be a big win, though, for the Rams if they can secure the inside nickel and dime packages, having another inside guy like Sean Jolly rise to the occasion, or even Quentin Lake at safety, being able to be a little bit more consistent this year. I think either of those would be huge for this defense.
Yeah, I think on the Rams Up podcast, we have probably spent 3 hours trying to sort out the Rams secondary. Yeah. There are about 9 different configurations that could emerge on day one. And I think what you said is true. It's going to be, there's a lot of good players. I'm not sure how many great players there are, though. Although we really love Quentin Lake. He looks like he's going to be one of the leaders of that defense. Yep. So I wanted to throw out one name for you. And, it's kind of a dilemma when you're a fan of a team. There's always one guy that nobody else knows about that you like. And maybe a Ram fan drafts him or picks him up off the waiver wire. But, there's probably 30 guys like that on other teams that I don't know about. So does it really make any sense to try to target this guy? And the guy that Ram fans are pretty excited about is Jordan Whittington. We think he's going to end up being their number 4 wide receiver when all is said and done. How do you feel about him? I know no one's going to draft him, but do you have a take on him? Maybe it's a year early, but do you guys have a take on him at this point?
Andrew, you got anything, Mr. Draft Guru?
He was an older rookie coming in, so as a draft prospect, I didn't like him long term, just specifically for the Steelers. But if he can win that number 4 job, there could be value down the line. He's a physical receiver. He's not afraid of contact. I like that about him. He can high point the football, and that will say a lot. I mean, I know Tutu Atwell has been a little inconsistent, but if he can beat him out and be that number 4, I think that would be saying something, that this team really does believe in him going forward. But that's just something, more of a future type pick. And if you're in a dynasty league, I think that he'd be a really good pickup. You can probably get him in the 3rd, 4th round of a dynasty league. I think that'd be a great addition.
Maybe this is just an opportunity for me to have a receipt for next year when Whittington's the next Puka. That would be nice. But he's another one of those guys that he's, 6'1", 205 in there somewhere, great blocker, team guy. And that's what's great about these receivers, talking about Kupp and Nacua. Whatever happens between those two, you're not going to see either one of them on the sideline complaining about not getting the ball thrown to them. And that's one nice thing about this wide receiver group. They're really unselfish. But that's just me being a Ram fan there for a moment. Sorry.
You're good. We do this all the time with the back end of the roster guys that you think might have a shot. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and hey, I did not see Kyren Williams blowing up like he did last year. Didn't see Nacua performing like he did. So, there's always a guy that surprises us. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us. Hey, why don't you tell everybody how they can find your podcast and your YouTube shows? I'm sure they'll be looking for some fantasy football advice down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew and I on the Draft Dynasty Podcast, we record, I think, typically Monday or Tuesday or so, and then it comes out every Wednesday in the morning. So you can check that out on the Fans First Sports Network NFL feed, wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart. It's all over the place. And then Andrew sometimes joins me on the Steelers Q&A on Sunday nights, but we do the Steelers Fix. If you want to get the lowdown on some of the Steelers players as well, you can tune into the Steelers Fix, which runs on Tuesday mornings right now, or Tuesday afternoons right now as well. That's the original Betz and Wilbur show, and we really enjoy that one. But definitely check out the DDP, the Draft Dynasty Podcast. If you're a draft nut, we have it for you. We say on the show, whether it's fantasy or for real, we've got you covered on the Draft Dynasty Podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, you guys. It's been a lot of fun. I think our Ram following is going to really enjoy this. And hey, maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Sounds great.
Okay, thanks a lot, you guys. Really appreciate it.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can reach us at ramsuppodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget about our YouTube channel. Our handle is at laramsup.com. Till next time, keep the horns up, stay safe, and have fun out there.